Maybe
neither
it's
do
the
I.
South American in me. Maybe it's like the Latin passion, but it's like, yeah, don't threaten me because I will
No,
test it.
I'd do it just for spite. I mean,
I probably
That's
wouldn't
funny
just for
that.
spite or to find out, but I certainly wouldn't take it on board. I would have to say, hey, I've got to do my job regardless
Yeah.
of what you
I
let
mean-
you do what you want to do. I have to do what I have to do.
right under the
Sorry
fuck
if that
around and
offends
find
you.
out doctrine. You know.
Okay, well, that's okay. I don't have a problem with that. It's just I feel like, and don't get me wrong, I like T-Jump. I've debated with him before. I do like the guy. I just feel like if you're in a debate, you should give a lot of respect to the moderator. It's a hard job to do. It's a very hard job if you've ever moderated, especially if you've moderated a dumpster fire. It is just ridiculously hard. So I think giving a little bit of respect is probably a good idea. He can disagree with me on that. That's fine.
No, I completely agree.
Everyone's entitled to their opinion.
I mean,
Yep.
I was saying like if I was Ryan, I just would have been like.
I think the debate was going well. I was like, I understand you wanted to move the topic along, so you got to follow the moderation. That's we agreed to when you did the debate, but
yeah,
like the back and forth, I don't think was too disruptive, and it looked like Luke honestly wasn't hearing what T-Jump was trying to say sometimes too, and so T-Jump was trying to correct it before he went on this totally different tangent. Like, I understand that, and
I
think he wasn't getting what T-Jump was saying, but like you can't just sort of cut him off, kind of thing, and not hear the guy out. I think the way that debates changed for me is I thought, if because T-Jump doesn't like people saying stuff stupid, and I'm kind of like, well, you're in modern day debate and you're against, a theist. I mean, not to say that all theists say stuff stupid, but some of them will. You will encounter, but you'll encounter atheists that'll say stupid stuff. So I'm not picking on the theists. I'm just saying you're going to encounter people saying stupid stuff. Think of it like an opportunity to sort of make a really good point in the debate. Like it's good for you. So I don't know why he doesn't allow it. Like, give them enough rope, they'll hang themselves.
Yeah.
If they're saying stuff that's stupid, then it's good for you. I don't understand why it's bad.
I have a question. I think I heard, if you mute me, I won't be coming back. And I was left thinking, won't he be coming back to the debate or in general to MDD as a platform? I want to ask.
MDD.
I think he said to MDD.
Yeah, MDD. Yeah, I would imagine so.
He said that before, though.
Good to see that I wasn't just me.
He's a lot of bluster.
He wants his own show. He's more respectful, I think, on his own show too. But he's getting super.
I think he is, yeah.
But he restreams like the content, anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I think he's a lot calmer when he's in charge, and not to say that he like abuses power or anything like that, but I think he is calmer. Like, I think he just deals a lot better with nonsense when he can sort of be in charge. But there's a lot of people that won't go on a debate if you're the one in the debate and also the moderator kind of thing. A lot of people go, well, I don't want to do that. And I can understand why. It's kind of, you want somebody neutral there. But if you agree to go on a neutral platform to debate, it's like going into a ball game and going, well, I agree to participate in this ball game, but I'm not going to listen to the ref. You can't do that. The ref might make terrible decisions, and you've just got to say, hey, I disagree with your decision, but I'm going to abide by it because that's the game kind of thing. That's what I've agreed to do. So,
There's one time I told Ryan, nope, I'm going to answer this question. Nope, I'm not moving on yet. And that was when that stinking racist Dustin Nemos.
Yeah.
He asked me if I was Jewish, like it was like an insult. I said, nope. What did you just ask me? Oh yeah, I'm Jewish. Yeah, you have a problem with that?
What, bro?
Chef kiss. That was great.
What I think
I think that was more he was trying to like stop the channel from being demonetized due to anti-Jewish sentiment being broadcast.
I think what's strange, what's so bizarre to me about that is I'm like, dude, your religion, Christianity, is completely predicated on Judaism. It's the same thing with Islam. I'm like, when Daniel attacks Islam, I'm like, attacks Judaism. I'm like, dude, you're attacking Islam. When Christians attack Judaism, you attack Christianity. Like, you don't have Christianity without Judaism. What do you think Jesus is? Do you think he
Most
was
of the
some
book.
European Roman guy? He's a Jew. The whole point is they have a whole genealogy saying that he's supposed to be a descendant of King David. They're trying to prove this messianic lineage of Judaism.
Okay. Yeah, so the way that the major apologetic I've heard on that one is that the Jewish sort of interpretation of the Torah and the Old Testament by default is kind of a corruption, an offshoot that's a corruption, and God always intended the New Testament to be the real one, basically, the good one. So I don't know. I agree with you, Isa.
But the whole
100%
premise of the
agree
New
with you.
Testament is that it's Jewish. Like, this is why I was
Yeah.
mentioning this with Matt Dillahunty. I'm like, bro, who wrote the New Testament? It's Jewish people. It's a Jewish book about Jewish people. Yes, it says non-Jews are now can be a part of the community, but all the things. Why are you quoting Isaiah? Why are you quoting Jeremiah? Why are you quoting all of these Jewish prophets? Because you're making a point. Because Jesus is the Jewish king. He's the Jewish Messiah. So I'm like, it's so weird when I hear these folks say, oh, I hate Jews and I hate Judaism. I'm like, then just discard the New Testament. Discard the entire corpus, because you can't sustain believing in Christianity if you reject Judaism. You just can't do it.
I agree with you. I'm just telling you what the major apologetic is, that the Jewish interpretation has been corrupted, and that the one under Jesus is the correct one, and that's usually what I hear.
And I totally hear that. I'm just saying, I'm like, even if that's the case, I'm like, Jesus is a Jew. Even Paul of Tarsus is a Jew. All of the apostles are Jews. They're Jews who believe in Jesus, but they're Jews. They're not like non-Jews. And I'm like, this is such a bizarre argument. And I'm like, and I hate to say this, I think particularly for European culture in general, a lot of Europeans have lost their culture because of the advent of Christianity. Christianity took away European culture, and it's hard because it's like, who are your heroes? Your heroes are Jewish people, and then you're like, well, they're not really Jews, they're actually Europeans, and I'm like, that's sad, man.
I don't
Sorry,
agree with that.
I don't know about which, because European culture isn't really a thing. It's more that there are Germanic cultures and French cultures and Italian cultures, kind of thing, Greek cultures. There's all kinds of cultures.
I totally understand that. Let me clarify what I mean. What I'm saying is, you have this religious milieu, you have this religious narrative. What are most of these cultures in Europe? What do they follow? Well, they follow some variant of Christianity, which is it's an offshoot of Judaism. And some might even argue it's a form of Judaism. So the thing that it's hard for me where I'm saying this, I'm like, the heroes of a lot of these cultures are Jewish people. It's a very bizarre thing that I've seen. I'm like, well, where are the European heroes? Well, they're not really relevant. Like Beowulf, the point of why Beowulf becomes relevant is because he becomes Christian. All of these, if you go, like, I went to Ireland and I was like, oh my gosh, I was reading the Irish literature and I'm like, wow, they because they started to believe in Jesus, they became to have relevance. Like all of these protagonists and characters, or it's just folklore. You know what I mean? It's very bizarre. It was a very bizarre thing that I noticed when going into the deep dive of looking into this.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I would say like the major influence for a long time was the Roman Empire, right? Mostly controlling. If you look at the history of like just written languages, there was only one major written languages in that region for hundreds of years. It was Latin. And then all of a sudden the Roman Empire collapsed, became, I would say, a theocracy, even though Catholics hate it when I say that, whatever. And then all these other written languages blossomed. All these other diverse cultures blossomed. Yes, I would grant that they also adopted Christianity when it became the mandated religion of the Roman Empire. And like, what was it? 430? Well, it wasn't Constantinople. He made it the state religion, but it was a guy like 100 years later that said no other. He outlawed all other religions. So Constantine. Constantine made it the state
Yeah, but he was the
religion.
start of it. Yeah, but
Yeah,
he was
yeah.
the start of it. I think he had plans to outlaw it from the very start, to be honest with you.
Well, he
Outlaw
didn't.
other religions.
Yeah, he didn't.
Well, he
though.
didn't, but I think that's what he was trying to head
Okay.
towards.
Well,
I think-
so you got the influence. Sorry, I'll let Tux talk.
Well, I also think it's quite a coincidence that Pontius Pilate didn't bring it before Rome. I just crucified this guy, and he's back 3 days later. My soldiers just told me so.
yeah.
It could be wrong. I could be wrong, but there's like a disconnect of about 300 and ish years.
That would
It's
seem like
actually
a
really
major
bizarre
event.
historically. It's bizarre historically speaking because we know about the Roman Empire, and the whole story of Pontius Pilate I find very dubious. The story is that it says that they take the Yom Kippur or the Day of Atonement story, where you have the Jesus of Barabbas and Jesus Christ functions as the Lamb of God, and Jesus Barabbas functions as the goat. So in the story of Yom Kippur, basically the sin gets put on the goat, and the goat runs away, and then the lamb is sacrificed. So this is fitting the metaphor and the allegory of the narrative and the story, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the issue is Romans did not listen to the people they conquered. We have no evidence of that. So there's this claim that Pontius Pilate, who is pretty much a wicked, horrible person according to what we know in history, he was a very barbaric person, is saying that you can free one of these people. I'm like, when have the Romans ever done that? We know at Masada, if you go to Israel and you go to the Masada, they
Been
said,
there.
we're going to destroy this Israel rebellion. We're going to destroy these Jews. The 1,000 people, they built the bridge over, and they said, we're going to, if they don't surrender, we're going to kill them. And they did a mass suicide. So I'm like, the Romans were not these kind, genteel folks that said, oh, we're going to liberate people. So it's a very bizarre thing to see in the story because we know that this narrative never existed historically speaking. It's a spiritual story, but not
Romans
historical.
were brutal.
Yeah, but also the Bible was written in the times where the Romans were very much in charge, and if they had sort of not sort of displayed the Romans as pretty benevolent, would it even have been allowed in sort of Roman colonies and civilization kind of thing? I would say not. I think that it's written like that because it had to be. Like you have to write it like that, or else the Romans are going to get very upset about it.
Yeah, you're not going to live very long to tell the tale.
That's totally fair. I just think it's bizarre where people are like, this is history. Like Tux was talking about this before. They're like, oh, the history is here. And I'm like, history of what? Like, I mean, it's dubious at best if we're going to try to look at it like at literal history. Like, it just doesn't work that way. Because, like, first and foremost, the New Testament gives us this point of trying to showcase genealogies to us. Well, what's Paul's genealogy? Where does he come from outside of the New Testament? We don't know. I think I was considering writing a PhD. Did Paul of Tarsus actually exist? We have absolutely no idea if he did. We don't know if he's a complete construction or not, because he claims a lot of things. He claims he's a student of a great rabbi named Gamaliel. Did he? We have no idea. We have no idea if that claim is true. No idea about most of the claims that are attached to him. He's a citizen of
And
Rome.
we know
well, the Romans
he
don't have
did not
any.
write some of the epistles that
Aristotle.
have been attributed to him. We know that.
We don't
Mhm.
know. It's like that's the correct point. We have no idea about this dude. It's very dubious at best. And it's so funny because people are like, well, is Jesus a myth? I said, is Paul a myth? I think that's a very good question to ask because the only source we have on him is the New Testament. And yes, there's like maybe some Jewish source that's like 1,000 years later, but I'm like, or a great time year later, but it's, in my understanding, it's like a reflection of engaging because people are mentioning that this guy Paul existed. We have absolutely no idea though.
Yeah.
We don't. What's his bloodline? What's his genealogy? That's a big thing
Well-
for Jews, Arabs, Semites. We care about that.
I don't think it's been a successful argument, but there is a element of I've seen evidence or I've seen the argument made that some of Paul's letters were actually written somewhere around 70 BCE, rather than in the 50s and 60s of 80
Before Jesus?
before
There's only
Jesus.
7 that are
That because
attributed to him, right?
even though these letters are written in a way where we read them where it was like one long letter, these are actually letters that have gone back and forth. And there is believed that some of these letters could have been written long before Jesus. Yes. It's evidence. I wouldn't say it's great evidence. It's no better evidence than my enslavement turned religion, conspiracy theory, as Max put it.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend. It was just what the
It was
thought that
not.
came to mind.
It was not an offense. It was not an offense. It is an out there. It is out there. I just think that there is, whether or not it's malevolent, there is an attribute that propaganda is going on full force in Genesis 1 through 11, in my opinion. And that ties into why I believe that you no longer get to live if you follow this thought process. But you gain all this old time philosophy that there wasn't an education institution to teach it to you in that time comparative to now.
I think Thomas Jackson's question there is pertinent. Like, I think most scholars would say Jesus existed, but there is an argument to make for mysticism. It's based on Bayesian logic, but I don't even think Carrier is that convinced it's a good argument.
I would probably say that's true. I think. Oh, somebody else is here. Oh no.
And
I see what happened.
And there's this guy that was going around that was trying to show that Flavius actually created the stories and stuff like that. And
yeah, I think the
remember his
Luke
name.
argument that Luke used some of Josephus is, I think that's a fairly decent argument. And there was another thing that I think it was in Matthew that he may have used a small amount as well. There was something else I want to say. I forget what we were talking about before. It's gone. I wanted to show this. I wanted to show this clip right here, and this comment right here. Jesus basically came and said the Pentateuch is done and over with. So I have queued up.
That's one interpretation of it.
Yes, that is one interpretation of it, but I want to refer to Sam Harris here.
Still anchored to a belief in revelation. They're still fixated on the texts, but they have ignored much of what seems untenable in the texts, and they don't have an argument about why that's okay. Because if God wrote any of these books, and nowhere in the book does God say, well, you could ignore the first half because now I'm getting to the good part. It's all God's words. It's actually a less principled position than fundamentalism.
There you go. Tell me more. Thank you for that comment.
Well, Sam Harris, don't get me wrong, I have nothing against Sam Harris. He isn't a theologian and he isn't a biblical scholar. He's a neurologist and he's got some amazing things to say. But I think that when it comes to that, I don't know. It's very hard because it does say that not one jot or tittle will be changed until everything has come to pass of the law. And he said, well, Jesus said, well, I'm not here to change the law. I'm here to fulfill it. And then they say, well, fulfill means to, basically say that it's done. And it's like, there's so much interpretation that can be made of that. So much interpretation. And you also have to take into the account that the interpretation that is in the New Testament that sort of in I think it's Peter, he says that he doesn't have to, do the law anymore about wearing what he wears and what he eats kind of thing. So I think there's a whole lot, it is so up in the air what he meant by that. I think it's sort of suspicious. I think that sort of saying that you haven't come to change the law means that the laws should stay the same. But there's argument about that. So I think that one is really up in the air. Don't shoot me.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, this situation, because what we're looking at is different kinds of Jewish peoples. And that's the thing. Like, if you read the New Testament through a Jewish lens, it becomes a very different kind of text than when you're reading it through, let's say, a British lens. You know, like the New Testament's, the British translation, like a King James translation. It becomes a completely different text because you understand who the Pharisees are. You understand who the Sadducees are. They're not just people who don't believe in heaven. They're like a really fully fledged group of people that have their own dreams, their own ideals, the ways that they operate. And it's a very different space than when you're reading it like this other kind of thing. Because I've been with, like, in a Bible study, and people are like, oh, you know, it's yeah, these are people who just don't believe in afterlife. And I'm like, no, they're a lot more complex than that. And
Yeah,
there's a lot of limitations on it, I think.
they're actually a Jewish subculture. They're their own series of beliefs and things. They're not just
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I have to agree. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's the point. I'm like, and that's the thing. I'm very big into multiculturalism and culture and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I want to honor cultures from where they're coming from. And I love Howard Zinn's like people's history because he looks at history through their own eyes. He looks at indigenous people through their own eyes. And I think it's super important that we're looking at Jewish texts. How do these Jewish people from this time live? How do they operate? How do they think? Instead of like doing this retcon where we're like, hey, I'm going to use my own modern sensibility and try to read the text this way. And I think it hurts the text, personally.
You should Issa, you should email James tonight and challenge Steve McRae to a debate on DEI.
Oh,
Just saying.
yeah.
That would be a wonderful debate.
I'm very big into DEI. I think DEI is super important. It's something that's very useful. I think that there is there's overcorrections and misappropriations of it, but that's with everything. You know what I mean?
I would think it'd be wonderful to see like a Muslim argue for DEI versus Steve McRae. It would just be wonderful to see. You should do that. Just anyways. You guys went at it a little bit.
Certainly mix up the usual, atheist, secular humanist arguing DEI. That would certainly mix it up. Yeah.
What is DEI? I'm sorry.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Because they think it's like a prescription, like or something like that. It's prescribed. You must do all these certain things to make it worse for certain classes of people. And anyways, it's not what it's really intended to be. It's supposed to be whatever like brings about the best outcomes, anyways, isn't it? Like if this type of workforce or society brings about the best outcomes, that's the one we should pursue. Like, and you can study it and learn from it. So they'll see like one example like they did in that. I don't want to talk about it because I think these type of topics get the videos demonetized. But like they were like
I'm not monetized.
Oh, okay. Then it doesn't matter. They were talking about like trans issues. Well, there's 600 young girls that got double mastectomies, and that in a year. Okay, is that bad? Well, some of them regret it. How many? Well, I don't know. It's a lot of them. You don't know. You have no clue. But there's 2,000 lawsuits in the UK. Like now we're talking about the UK.
Did you say over here? Did you say young girls got vasectomies? Did you say that?
Mastectomies.
Mastectomies.
Their breasts removed under 18.
Okay, got you.
Yeah, so I'm like, it's 600 girls. And like, well, you're just saying there's just a statistic. If it improved their outcomes, like, I don't know. I'm not their doctor or their therapist or the parents or the person that's doing the thing. If 10% regretted it and wish they had them back, they're not getting them back. They can wear like, what do you call it? Like prosthetics or something. It's harder to do implants for that than it is.
Yeah, but they still probably can do something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm like, but they don't have any numbers. They're just pointing to all these anecdotes. Oh, there's this school in the UK where 60 to 80 of the kids out of 450 said they were something other than cis. I'm like, how? So it's like 15%. I'm like, how do we know that's not the natural rate because of oppression throughout history? How do we know it? Then they'll blame the teachers. You can't taught. You don't have any evidence it's the teachers convincing people to be other than they are. Maybe they're explaining it wrong. Maybe they're explaining it right and people are like exploring. Or maybe it's a social meme where people are just experiencing it as some social thing that people are talking about. It's not the school or the teacher, it's a community. They're exploring. And then even if it is 15%, why is it bad? No answers. But in Texas, teachers are teaching creationism. I'm like, what the fuck does that have to do with anything we were just talking about? This was Steve McRae. Like, dude, you're whatever.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of
That's weird.
overcorrection.
Well, that's fine.
I
There
think,
could be-
and
How
I,
do you
and I
know
think
that? How do you know there's overcorrection? How do you know we're just not still coming back to normal? How do you know oppression hasn't squashed the numbers now and a more acceptance? There's not universal acceptance for being LGBT in the United States, right? There's definitely not universal acceptance. So you're saying it's an
course.
overcorrection? How can
It's
you
a-
know when there's not universal acceptance?
It's overcorrection in certain spaces. This is why he's upset. See, I can empathize.
How
and
do you
understand
know?
that some-
How do you know?
because I'm in these spaces. I'm in the university spaces. I've been in university forever.
How
And
do you
they
know
do
it's
have
not
this-
the normal? How do you know
But
it's
the
not the
problem-
normal?
The problem is because there's silencing of other opinions and voices that exist. It is problematic, and
Well,
and
that's
because the
another
point is-
issue.
Well, and that's the issue that people are having the problem with. But your point is taken, and it's fair because there is the thing is, even though in these spaces, like where we look in like Hollywood and we look at film and stuff like that, we see these certain kinds of depictions that of elites. They're Hollywood elites. They're not really talking about the common person. And you're correct. The struggle of the common person is real. It is there. Trans issues are real. You know, like with the
Well,
J.K. Rowling situation, it's sad because people are getting angry at her, and I'm like, that's not the problem of what the issue is. It's not her that's the issue. The issue is that there's a lot of intolerant people that abuse people, and you need to engage that, not like a famous writer of fiction, you know. And I think
I have to disagree. Her voice is a prominent one, and she is denying their identity. Like whether or not, like whatever her motivations for that is, it still affects people very greatly. Like it still does affect them a lot. So I do have to disagree with that. She's a public figure. She's got a lot of people that pay attention to her. If she comes out and says, "Hey, you are not what you claim to be," that is a very, very dismissing thing because of the scope and reach of her voice. So I totally disagree. It is a problem.
so
now you
I-
got
I-
people out there saying that Barbara Bush was a man. They're saying that Michelle Fox, I think her name is, and the actress is a man because
They've
they
been
believe
saying
all these.
Michelle Obama is forever.
Oh,
Like,
Michelle Obama is a man because they're convincing this friggin' If anything, you could argue there's a social correction that's responding to it in a negligent
Reactionary.
fashion. They're being super reactionary
yeah,
to people just being who they are.
I
Like
know.
if no one worried about who people identified as long as they're not harming other people, I don't think maybe we'll finally find out what the national rate of gay people are, lesbian people are, trans people are, because right now we do not know because all of these are about people's personal preferences in the case of sexuality and whether it's a choice or biological or their nature, their nurturing or whatever, it doesn't matter. There's nothing wrong with the people having that sexuality, whether trans is a choice, which I deny, or biological and psychological, which I tend to believe it's so. It doesn't take away from the fact, even if it's either or, who cares if somebody decides they want to express themselves as a woman?
We
or a
don't know
man.
for sure,
So-
but the research that I've seen suggests there is at least a large neurological component to it. That your brain has to be sort of hardwired, if you will. I hate using that term, but hardwired in a certain way for this to even happen. So, I'm not going to go digging through papers, but you know that's essentially what I've read.
Well,
but we don't know for sure. I'm
They
not
reject the
claiming any-
papers.
So I
Sorry?
wanted to engage what you
But
were
they
saying.
reject the papers. But let's go with this. There are still people today that are afraid to come out as gay to their family. There's still
Sure,
people
of
afraid
course,
today
Of course.
to come out as lesbian. There's still people today afraid to come out as trans. So if you got a bunch of children who are like, fine, I'm gay, when they're really not, but they're trying to create like a social acceptance. It's like when we started reframing what atheism meant in the 90s to try to take away the social stigma of identifying as atheist, as instead of taking this, you just disbelieve in a God, which is sort of like, you're just denying what's real, dude. And to try to turn it toward like it's a lack of belief, opening the umbrella, which like I'm totally fine with that. It's destigmatizing it, the thing. So even if a person only lacks a belief or they believe God doesn't exist, they're destigmatizing the term. So if some person, some kid, you have a friend it's like the person who shaves their head bald because their daughter is going into chemo and she's going to lose all her hair. So right? So if somebody like says, "Oh, I'm trans, I'm going to stand beside you," when they're really not, because their kids like just role playing. Like, I don't have a problem with that. So we don't know. We just don't know.
So I wanted to engage one thing quick about Mark, what you had said. You were saying that going back about J.K. Rowling, I don't think that celebrities and famous people need to be saints. I take a pretty actually libertarian position. I think people are entitled to their opinions, and I'm going to tell you something that kind of makes me a little bit upset. All these holy rollers that come out and say, "I'm going to call you out and tell you about how immoral you are," and I'm like, "Excuse me, are you moral? Are
immoral, you mean?
Yeah, sure, immoral. Yeah, are you on the ethical? Are you on the ethical wavelength of ethical purity? It's like this purism test, and I'm like, why are we? This person has an opinion. She has her opinion about biological women. That's her opinion. But what happened was when these people came and they said, "Hey, how?" Because originally, what I was researching this, her position was she had supported this journalist, and the journalist was saying that trans women and biological or cis women are different, but it wasn't actually hostile towards trans women, the original article. So she basically platformed that position. So people got extremely offended. And my understanding is that JK then became extremely reactionary to that position, and it created this huge warfare. And I'm like, look, it's like, I totally think, I agree. Like, I am with you, Mark, that I think we should be ethical. I'm going to try to be ethical, but I'm not going to hold people to my standard. And I don't really care if famous people hold some ethical standard, because that's not what famous people's goal are. I don't see them as my moral standard of truth and justice, and I think that's the problem. We do an idolatry. We worship celebrities, we worship writers, we worship all of these different types of people and expect them to be the paragons of truth and justice. And I'm like, but they're not. They're a good fiction writer. That's it.
Issa, I'm going to have to stop you there, mate, because I don't worship any of these people. It's pragmatic, because as much as I would like it that nobody had the reach these people have, that nobody sort of have the influence that they do have. But while they do, and they can be held accountable, I think that we do need to hold them accountable for what they say, because they have power. Like, I'm gonna quote Spider-Man, which is terrible, but with great power comes great responsibility, and how to use that power. And I think there is a truth there. Like, you can't just be given the power to sort of reach all of these people and use it unwisely or unethically. So how would we feel if somebody was racist, for instance, and had the level of power that J.K. Rowling had? What if somebody was...
Marjorie Taylor Greene does. She believes in Jewish space lasers.
Sure.
She has
I think
no real accountability for anything that she said. So
yes, and I think that's wrong. That's the thing. Like, that's whataboutism, Issa, and you know it. That's sort of saying, well, what about Nigel? Yeah, I don't agree with her either, and think that she shouldn't be allowed to say the things she is as well. Like, so I'm all for free speech, but when you're verging on hate speech, when you're verging on saying, hey, these people aren't real, whatever, they're not really this, they're not really that, and you're basically doing harm to others by the amount of power and reach that you have, then yeah, I don't have a problem with people cancelling J.K. Rowling. She did not support an issue that needs to be supported. I think that she sort of deserves everything she gets, quite frankly.
But why? Like we see, I'm on this issue. I
Well, because
ethically
we
agree
don't
with you.
tolerate bigotry. We don't tolerate bigotry.
But there's all kinds of bigotry that we do tolerate.
Like-
it's hard for me to fathom. Like, for example, we could say, you know, we tolerate the slaughter of animals and we consume animals. We could say that that's a bigotry to animals. We tolerate it, we accept it, we
come on now.
commercialize it. We commercialize it.
We don't use bigotry to mean us, you know, doing things to animals. Like that isn't
We say we
bigotry.
say we're higher than the animals and we're allowed to do whatever we want to these animals. That is bigotry. We
I
are
don't say
saying
I'm
we are a
higher than
superior
you.
species.
Animals.
We are saying we are a superior
Well-
species to animals. Thus, we are
Slippery,
allowed to
this
do
is this is a red herring. I mean, we're talking about
Oh,
humans
sure,
here.
yeah.
Like, why are we going down
Yeah,
Why is that a
plus
red
that-
herring?
animal
Hang
path? Give
on,
us an
hang on.
example with humans.
If interspecies prejudice is bigotry, that means that when a shark eats me, it's bigotry. That's the level of ridiculousness we're getting into here.
I don't think
Because
so.
that's a
Because
species treating
I'm
me
talking
badly
about
because
humans.
I'm human and not a shark. Like that's the
I'm
level
talking-
of ridiculousness.
I'm a speciesist.
So I'm talking about
Well-
what humans are doing to animals. I'm not. See, first of all, I can't.
Yeah, I don't
can't
know
even really
why.
go into the space.
Yeah.
We were
can't even
talking
go into
about
the
We're not
trans.
going down a vegan.
We were talking
path.
about trans bigotry. Like you're correlating being bigoted towards trans people to eating meat and slaughtering
was-
animals.
That's a straw man. That's not my argument. My argument that I'm making is that I'm trying to say that Mark asked, he said, what kinds of bigotry exists? I said, this is a type of
Yes.
bigotry that exists. I didn't
It's
say
not
that
bigotry.
it's a human bigotry that exists. It's a form of bigotry that exists of what humans can do to other animals. So that I do think it's fair
not
and it's
because
more in
bigotry
aligned.
is the treatment of humans towards another, like based upon their race, culture, religion. You know, all of these things. There's a series of criteria for bigotry.
I mean, that's how you're
And
defining it.
Species is not one of them. Okay, that's not bigotry because bigotry is judging a person. Like, so you would have to make the case that, you know, animals are people and deserve such treatment under the law.
Under your
and-
definition. That's not how I defined it. Clearly, I didn't define it the way that you defined it. That was your definition. I'm
Okay,
saying
so I don't know
that
what
the
you're talking
discriminate-
about when you're saying bigotry. then.
bigotry is a discrimination against another being. So I'm including animals, humans, whatever. I'm not saying bigotry to me is not just
Okay.
humans. So that's
So you're
how I
bigoted
defined it.
towards vegetables then?
I mean, if you, I memean, I think that you're.
It's
it's-
an
first of
absurd
all,
argument. Like we were
I-
talking
first
about.
of all, I was talking
Can you
about,
give us an example of
human
how
beings.
everybody's bigoted towards other humans? I think we're getting into absurd.
One
Oh, absolutely,
Once-
we're getting into absurdity.
1 second before you continue. I need to go because it's almost 4 a.m. here. Jimmy, thank you so much for having
Yes.
me. Thank you to
Thanks,
everyone
Max.
else.
Oh, thanks,
uh,
Max.
I'll take
Bye,
care and I'll be
Max.
seeing you around.
We're not the nicest we could possibly be to animals. Does everybody agree?
I acknowledge that. Yeah,
I agree.
I would like to see more humane treatment of animals. Yeah.
Okay.
I would change my stance on animals if I thought an evolution process could start where we could communicate across the table, much like we are right now in this room.
I
And
think
I don't think that would happen.
I tend to think like maybe the great apes are people. I don't know. Like some toothed whales are people, like dolphins and porpoises. Maybe they're people. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You know, we could
I'm
come
not
up with
saying they are.
technologies too that change that dynamic of sitting around a table or conversing much in a room like this as well. So
They're learning to talk to whales.
yeah,
Like
I
we
think-
are. It's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool, but I would rather hear a sort of example of bigotry where humans are being bigoted to one another, kind of
that's
thing.
fine.
So
Classism.
equals
How we
choice is
treat
what we're talking about.
how we treat the unhoused. That's a perfect example.
Yeah,
We
yeah, I
treat the
got a big
unhoused
problem
horribly.
with that. Yes,
We treat
I
the
got a big
unhoused.
problem.
I
with
do a
that.
lot of work. I do a lot of work to helping the unhoused, and it's a horrendous situation where we ignore people. We don't help people with mental health issues. It's a very difficult
Yes.
situation.
So, do you think if J.K. Rowling stood up and said, "Hey, you know, the unhoused don't deserve to be, you know, they're not really bad off. They don't deserve to be helped," kind of thing, do you have a problem with that?
I personally do. See, like I said, ethically, I'm with you. I just have
Okay.
an issue of saying I'm going to deplatform. My issue is not about the ethics. We actually agree on the ethics on this. Because I take a leftist approach myself on a lot of these things where I'm like, look, I'm actually doing a social work program right now, so this is something that's very important for me. But I definitely think we need to care about trans people. I definitely think we need to care about the rights of folks. But my issue is like, I don't really care about if these big, because I'm like, most politicians do the same thing. They say they deserved it. I hear so many politicians say, you know what,
Yes.
those unhoused people, they deserve it, and they're not deplatformed. They're fine. They're like, yeah, you know, those politicians are right. We don't need to actually allocate resources to helping these people. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Yeah,
that's
but
that's
if you
my
could
feeling
if you
towards it.
could deplatform the politicians by electing them out or whatever, would you?
I probably would. Yeah. I mean, personally, I would do
And
that. But
then
yeah.
yeah, those
But
politicians, they're really relying on sort of a political mandate from people in order to have their platform. And unfortunately, you know, the people are supporting them even though they do say these terrible things. And you're right, they do. Absolutely. I'm not disagreeing with you on that at all. But the whole thing is that J.K. Rowling is you know, she's a writer and an author and you know, a spokesperson, so she kind of is in a different situation where she can be deplatformed by people just doing it on their own, especially her audience, which largely is pretty progressive.
yeah.
So you know, that progressive audience may not be able to do something about some, you know, Republican senator in Texas or something, but they sure as shit cannot buy a Harry Potter book. So really, we're really talking, that's where I get back to the pragmatics of it all. Really, we're talking about what can we do rather than if we can't stop this person, we should stop nobody. And I think that's where you're going wrong. You're sort of saying, hey, but all of these other people say awful things and we don't do anything about them. But it's more all of these other people say awful things and we can't do anything about them. We would love to be able to, but we can't. So really, it does come down to who can we do something about and what is that something we can do? And that's a good conversation to have. But sort of saying other people get away with it, I'm really sorry, Isa, that's just whataboutism.
Well, there's a reason why I'm going there. I'm saying what I find,
Okay.
and this is my personal opinion, it's hypocrisy. It's not really whataboutism. I don't think these people are holding these people's feet to the fire. They don't make the same noise. See, the thing is, you're right. Maybe they don't have power to de-elect them. They don't actually have any real power to stop J.K. Rowling. She's a millionaire, or is she a billionaire now? Whatever
Yeah,
they
I
say,
think so.
she's super wealthy. They're not going to stop her. She's still going to keep making money. All they're doing is just making a fuss. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. But they don't make a fuss about these people. It's the same thing where I see a lot of people, they get so mad about certain countries doing certain things, but they will not hold the same standard. What I'm saying is I'm talking about accountability. And I feel it's not a whataboutism, because I'm like, look, these people get so mad about this one thing, but they will not get mad about these other things. Maybe they're ignorant. That's possible. Maybe they don't know these things. But my issue is, I'm like, if you are so sincere about being, you know, an advocate and a warrior for justice, then why aren't you doing this advocacy in these other places? I don't see people going out and saying, yo, look at these politicians, man. If they did the same kind of noise and they wrote op-eds and said all this stuff, because these people actually have power. Politicians have power. J.K. Rowling, she's a writer. She writes books. She writes stories. She has political power.
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. I do. Like, but there are people speaking up, like Taylor Marjorie Green or whatever. Marjorie Taylor Green. She's criticized a lot, right? Like, I see a lot of influencers, media, a lot of different things saying how horrible she is for the things that she says on a regular basis. Like, it's absolutely astounding she has any power at all, in my opinion. But what my thing wasn't about the power, it was about the reach. And I would put it to you that J.K. Rowling at her height had way more reach than any politician you'd care to name. I think she had more reach than the British Prime Minister. I think she had more reach than the president, especially to young people. So we've got to look at this in the right context, that, oh yes, these people have power over, you know, things like financial policy, social policy, all of these policies. But if you have a person with a reach of the size, like the ability to get to an audience the size of J.K. Rowling, and the way the audience look to her as sort of a, and like you said, idolized her. I think that is the big problem, that when she starts to say things that are problematic, it's like, well, yeah, a politician might say that, but they don't have the reach that she does. She can, in like sort of, an entire countries around the world will hear her, and a lot of those people are young people who look up to her, and that's the problem. It's the reach, not the power. So I want to differentiate those two things.
Well, let's try and move on to a different subject. Somebody mentioned that we thought we were talking about Christianity around here instead of this. So I was like, well, let's talk about Christianity. Let's finish, and then I'll do a moment of Zen. Let's finish with each person's intuition
Sorry,
after reading the Bible.
I just want to say to Isa, like, I agree with you over terrible people being in power. I agree with all of that, like, totally. And I do see your point. Like, I do see your point. But I hope we can argue about this and still respect one another and stuff, because I do, and I do respect your point. So I really do.
Thank you. We'll talk about it later. I know we're on a different platform here, but I have
Yeah.
I have a framework to engage this point later on when we have another conversation. We'll engage.
Okay, sure.
Oz, are you leaving?
No.
Or are you
just
waving
made
to
me
somebody
big.
else?
You made me big.
I'm going to make you
waving
big.
at myself.
I'm going to get the Earl. I was going to do Earl first, but she might not be on. So
I'm
She's
still
in the chat.
here. I'm just.
you're here. I was going to ask everybody what their if they believe that Christianity is a human construction, and what their best reference point biblically is to that human-made construction.
Me first, or
As you don't have to go first. I can.
I can go
can
first.
Go
I'm
first.
Go for it.
Okay. So I don't use the Bible to justify claims in the Bible. I'm a atheistic naturalist. So, like, I believe the Bible is a human construction because all religions are human constructions. They're created within the minds of humans to try to understand the world, provide reasons to enforce laws and rules and stuff like that, and culture and community and ethical frameworks for those things. So that's my, like, the Bible to me, like, has a lot of internal contradictions. But I've never believed it was true. And I would say that's why I believe it's human construction. Nothing to do with the Bible itself.
Well, Earl, what are you thinking?
I think religion in general is a tool used to control people. I think that the concepts, I think that the Bible in particular, I don't know about how Christianity, like whether Christianity started has that same motivation, but certainly the Bible as it was created did that. They create this hell concept, and it's meant to subjugate the masses, and give people a reason to hate other people. Like, it's just it's a built-in excuse. Like, here you go. But in terms of Christianity's origins, I think that it was a lot of stories, and then because of the way that humans are going to human, things became untruths that people honestly believed. I don't think that it was a bunch of lies. I think that it was a bunch of people that honestly thought this was true and wrote it down, but it's still not true. But that they honestly believed it.
Yeah. Honestly.
Yeah. They're just honestly mistaken.
All right. Bald Men Unite. Mark, you got a moment of
Oh yeah, sure.
clarity on
Yeah. So is the Bible a construct? I think in a way it is. I think there's some things in there that probably did reflect accurately sort of the way that people lived and the culture that they lived in and what they believed to be true. But I really push back against this idea that it is a history book, like it describes history. It's not. It's more it's more useful as a cultural insight into the people that lived during that time. There's a few reasons to sort of understand why this is, especially the formation of the Yahweh figure from older Canaanite religions. There used to be a pantheon, which Yahweh was just the son of El, the chief god, and there was his brother Baal and Asherah, the consort of El, and just a whole bunch of these gods. And understanding how Yahweh became the central fixture for this one Israelite religion is sort of a key to understanding how this book was constructed to sort of say, hey, it's the only God and my God is the greatest kind of thing. There's also a lot of other contextual clues from history, like the fact that the Canaanite pottery and arts didn't have any Egyptian influence on it, and the Egyptians didn't have any Canaanite influence on it. That the Egyptians did not enslave the Israelites for the time they claimed, and that the history of architecture and art and pottery and all of these things, we know that the Canaanites instead referenced older Canaanite cultures, or the Israelites rather referenced older Canaanite cultures. We can kind of understand that this book is sort of talking in metaphors and talking in certain ways that perhaps the Canaanites were vassals underneath the Egyptians, not their slaves. So it isn't describing actual history, it's describing a people's interpretation of how they felt and how they experienced life and what sort of things were important to them. So this question of and the title is Can God Lie? It's sort of shown that God is kind of deceptive all the way, not all the way through, but at certain points in the Bible. So I think he can be deceptive. Did he lie in Genesis? He appears to on a surface reading of it. There's a lot of apologetics around that he didn't. But that's why I think that the Bible is a social construct, or it's more a cultural construct of the people at the time, sort of something that is their cultural mind. A lot of the stuff like Psalms, for instance, a lot of it, the laments are things like, well, we cry for the fall of Israel and the first temple kind of thing. A lot of it is these kind of wishful thinkings rather than prophecies. They're kind of, we will one day go back and this will happen and we will take these actions. So I really think it is it's an important book to understand the cultures of the near Middle East, but the actual religion isn't really historical at all, and it is just a social construct. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty good.
Sorry, I was a little wordy.
It's,
but you knew that had happened when you got me on.
That's right. Who wants a wallflower?
All right, I guess it's my go.
It's your go.
All right. So it's funny, Mark and I actually pretty much agree 100% on this. I think that Mark and I actually agreed on a lot of things. It's just we had a different kind of political thing on that thing, which is the funny issue on that. But I think that the way that we look at these texts, it's a spiritual narrative. It's not meant to be historical. It's not meant to be taken that way. But the problem is modern day people want to be taken that way because it gives them power. It empowers them to do so. There's a good chance if we look at the ancient Israelites, henotheism was a practice that probably was there. Henotheism means that there was multiple deities, but El was the highest god that needed to be followed. And this kind of form, like once we get towards the Axial Age, we get to this place of radical monotheism. But I definitely think that there's an evolutionary process that exists. We can see a lot of Babylonian tradition that's there. Like we see a lot of the imagery on the Ark of the Covenant, like the cherubim and the stuff. Like you see the epic battle between Marduk and what is it, like the Leviathan. It's like some great water serpent. I forget what the name is, but you see all of this stuff. I actually have no problem with this. A lot of people get really upset. They're like, no, this was like completely pure and unadulterated. And I'm like, no, all these cultures and spiritualities kind of fused within each other and kind of adapted from each other. And like Mark was saying, it's a cultural and I would say spiritual narrative that people had. And if you ask a lot of modern day Jews, a lot of them take that same position. Tiamat, yeah, I think I might be right. You have a lot of these. You have this spiritual narrative that people are carrying and holding on to, and that's what it is. It's a spiritual story. If you look at Jewish tradition now, a lot of people have these spiritual narratives about things like the Exodus. And if you ask some of the folks, secular humanist Jews, they'll say it's a story. They don't necessarily say it literally happened. It's a story. It's a spiritual narrative that you're tied to. Like we're tied to in the United States to President Washington and the cherry tree, that he was so honest and truthful with the cherry tree. Did this really happen? Who knows? It's a myth and a story that makes people feel connected. And I think that is that's the important situation, is that these are spiritual stories that have meaning for people and that carry them. But the problem is, as I think most people on the panel have said, is when it takes it to extreme. And I actually wanted to address something that Earl had said, which was the point about hell. The ancient Israelites didn't even carry this point of hell. They didn't even really know if there was an afterlife at all. Sheol, Gehenna, we don't even know if this afterlife was there. This thing developed throughout time, as we can see with the connection with Hellenism. And I don't see any problem with that. But that's just, these are stories that have developed, and as long as you're not hurting people and it helps you become a good human being, then I think it's fine. That's where I'm at with it.
So my relative feeling that Jesus became a god in some form or fashion because he was here, died, rose. I just don't believe that's true. I think there was a human Jesus that was a preacher. I think there were dozens and dozens of apocalyptic preachers that had gone through some sort of either the Qumran studies or some variation of what the Dead Sea Scrolls were doing, the Marcion movement, some variation of folks knew that there was an occupier coming, were preparing for an occupier coming, and they had plenty of stories to relieve the public and masses in the Jewish population, some form of entertainment that started to popularize in the first century. I think one of the biggest problems I have with Jesus being anything but a human is in the writings of James. And you can read the book of James in about 15 minutes. And in that you find a summary that I equate to the Beatitudes, Sermon on the Mount, and the Sermon on the Plain. I think James picked up the mantle, just as many of the apologists believe, from his brother Jesus. And I think this exemplifies the moment in which all he did was practice his trope and read. We can read what his trope was, his style, his words, whether he was a brother of the physical family or he was the brother in the spirituality of the cause of apocalyptic Jewish preaching at the time and bringing converts to their new cause. When you read the book of James, you don't find the most amazing thing I got to experience with my brother, who is a god. You have the things to make the world a better place while we're under occupation of a power such as the Roman government. There's no story about how I lost my brother and wow, he's back. And to me, that would be the most important thing to Christianity, having a God as its foundation, and that doesn't exist. And therefore, I think Jesus was a human, and humans were just making their way, much like Max said earlier, humans were making their way through this world just the same. Also, this comment right here, Get back to demons and tell the truth shall set you free. I feel like if there were demons being cast out then and demons are being cast out now, with nearly every single person, man, woman, and child, having a studio in their back pocket, we would have selfies with demons on full display 24/7. It would almost be blasé enough that it doesn't even get a popularity on a YouTube channel if they were there.
I'll do it for free.
See? It would be so commonplace if we hear the politicians, if we hear the preachers from the pulpit thundering away, telling us about how Nancy Pelosi is possessed by demons, the educational system, the financial institutions, the educational institutions, all the things that we hear day in and day out about these demons. I think we would have clear evidence that demons are real. They would be on 1,000 iPhones a day, and we would know. It'd be that simple. Demons don't care about your free will. They don't.
And then, like they say, cross-dressing. Like cross-dressing is entirely cultural. Like there's no gendered clothing. We just decide, like as a culture, what gender is what clothing. Different cultures will have different clothing, gendered clothing. It's ridiculous. Like, yeah. So it's like it's sin to like cross-dress. It's just based on the specific culture. So it's some relative moral like sin, depending on the culture. It's so weird. So weird.
It actually exists in many cultures, by the way, like the Hijra in South Asia. There's a group in Mexico. So you have all of these groups in many different places and spaces. So it's actually ancient. So it's very bizarre when people try to say it's some kind of abnormality.
Well, it's not even that. Like people can like cross-dress just to role play, just to be like flamboyant without being gay, without being transgender. Like there's no sin in wearing a dress. There's nothing immoral about me wearing a dress.
Wait, are you telling me every time I've been a femshep in Mass Effect that I've been trans? Is that what you're telling me?
Yes, if you choose a female role in a game, you're gender bending, dude. That's a sin.
Well, wow. just remember the first indication in art of Jesus, he is in a Roman tunic, which is essentially a skirt.
Yeah. Long hair.
If I remember correctly, the second and third and fourth art of Jesus is him in a tunic, a Roman tunic.
There is a Muslim cleric in Turkey, I believe. I just saw it on Twitter, so X, take it for what it is, who said that men who don't have beards are causing other men to sin because they look feminine, and it's causing them to be gay or to have impure thoughts if men don't grow beards.
I'm sorry. What?
Okay. Well, Oz, you are a handsome man.
Thank you. I think
you have a beard. You're not doing anything. You've got a beard. It's me that's to blame.
So let me tell you a story, Oz.
I was wearing a tank top on stream, and somebody comes on my stream and says that I was sending it because I was like trying to make him gay.
Oh boy,
like, dude!
Wow.
If me showing my shoulders is making you have gay thoughts, just might be gay. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, sounds like a
okay.
them problem. It really does.
And that's okay. I don't care.
Yeah, they obviously do.
We're sorry.
I love how we just interrupt.
Let's wrap the show up. It's gone just over 2 hours. Oz, thanks for doing a shout out to bring it over. This is definitely, without a doubt, the highest amount of live stream views that I've ever had. I think we were up just over 40 at one point, so that blows away anything I've ever had. So All the raid, read raid, and matters now raid raiders coming in. I appreciate it greatly. And I know, I think we've got an audience with Issa's channel as well. Am I pronouncing that right? Is it Issa?
Issa's right. You got it.
Yeah. And so I think we're getting some views from there as well. So I appreciate all of you panel coming on. And I've got to close with a little food for thought that's literally disgusting, but I don't care. I just don't care. So thank you all for coming on. We're going to do a little food for thought, then we're going to do a moment of Zen, and then we're outroed. So cheers all. Thank you for coming. So this is a representation of a galaxy that is just spinning around, and I just want to make the acknowledgement that I somewhat think that we are just nothing but a swirling cosmos of gas and poo and ignited poo. And that I'm just a small, tiny, tiny little piece on a floating rock that is swirling around in this apparently flushed cosmos. And I feel great, but in the scheme of things, the number of planets there are, in the number of galaxies there are, if I'm being told the truth about everything, it is a great deal of insignificance if we've just been flushed. So there is your poo for thought, folks. The poo particle. So, yes. Ever consider that the galaxies resemble a toilet flush? So, we are living on a rock that we fill with poo every day. And we just might be the shitheads that figuratively dwell on it. Huh. All right. Here's your moment of Zen.
Come to the Metropolitan in New York City, one of the most prestigious museums in the entire world, to make a bunch of dick jokes? I did. I sure did. You see, it's thought that in ancient Greece, a large schlong was considered not to be part of male beauty standards. So little. But why? That's right. I'm utilizing my vast knowledge of history to make weenie jokes. You're this man, Hercules. You've just completed the 12 labors, and they erect a giant, hard statue of you. But do you know what's not giant? Your schlong, because that's not a sign of strength or beauty there. You did not want to have this. You wanted to have this. Too big? Is this too big? In times as these, big PPs were considered to be vulgar, against the cultural norm. Too big. You see that face there? That's what they thought about BDE. It's not the size of the boat, it's the motion of the ocean. That motto originates in this part of history. That's a lie. I actually just made that part up. I just assumed. The rest is true. Did I come to the
It's been quite the weenie shrinker out there. I hope everybody stays warm in this winter, except for you, Mark. I know you're on the other side of the planet where it's still summer. So bow tie bless.
Freaking hot. It really is.